You won't regret it, I promise. Subscribe. My name is Daniel Walker. For 43 years in Chicago, I lived a life of a dutiful man, obedient husband, compliant father, steady provider. I believed my reward for restraint would be respect, maybe even a modest authority over the small territory of my days. What I received instead was dismissal, spoken in the tone of those who imagine they are entitled to decide another man's worth. It began, as humiliations often do, at the dinner table. "More salad, Daniel?" Rachel asked, her fork already poised over my plate, as if she were serving a child. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice carried a weight heavier than the word. Natalie buttered her bread with the concentration of a surgeon. She had that habit when avoiding something. Small, exact gestures, each a delay. "Dad," she said finally, "have you thought about retiring?" The question landed with the soft violence of a hammer wrapped in velvet. "Retiring from what?" I asked. "From all of it," Rachel answered in our stead. "The constant routines, the way you cling to the house. Maybe it's time to shift things, to simplify." Yes, that was her favorite word when she wanted to erase me without sounding cruel. I stared at Rachel across the table. Her hair, perfectly set in its auburn coil, gleamed under the chandelier. She had the composure of a woman rehearsed in every gesture. The tilt of her wrist, the way her wine glass lingered at her lips, the well-practiced smile that showed only the upper teeth. To anyone else, she might have seemed solicitous, even tender. To me, she looked like a surgeon preparing an incision. Natalie cleared her throat. "It's just the stress, Dad. After what happened at the bank last month," Rachel cut in. "We're only thinking about your health. Don't get defensive." I set down my fork. When did being asked to vanish become a health initiative? Silence. Rachel's eyes flicked toward our daughter, a signal to hold the line. Natalie, ever the loyalist to her mother's cause, forced a laugh, but it cracked in the middle. She was never good at deceit. That was the last meal the three of us shared before Natalie's heart betrayed her in the quiet hours of a January night. 42 years old, brilliant, accomplished, and suddenly gone. A single collapse on the polished floor of her Lincoln Park apartment. They said it was genetic, some defect overlooked. I did not believe it then, and I still do not. But belief changes nothing once the body has been sealed away. What remained was Rachel, her grief as immaculate as her wardrobe, and me, a man hollowed out, a man she found no further use for. She wasted no time. 2 weeks after the funeral, she approached me in the living room, brochures fanned across the coffee table like a deck of cards. The titles glittered: Silver Horizons, Golden Years Community, Lakeside Serenity. "These are excellent places, Daniel," she said. "They have activities, gardens, medical staff on site. You'd be comfortable." I lifted one of the glossy pamphlets. An old man, tanned and suspiciously fit, smiled on the cover as if his life had not been pawned off. "And what about you?" I asked. Her smile was crisp. "I'll stay here. This house is too large for you alone." "Caleb and I—" She stopped herself, but not soon enough. "Caleb," I repeated. The name clanged in the air. "Daniel," she sighed, as though I were the one who had broken decorum. "I want to be honest. I love him. We plan to marry." I remember the sound of my own breath then. Loud, animal, a wheeze against the silence. She brought 2 suitcases down the stairs 3 days later. "I want the house," she said. "It's mine. You can find another place to finish your days." Finish. As if I were already a ghost lingering in her way. So I obeyed. 2 trash bags, a handful of photographs, the wristwatch my father left me, and I was gone. The motel on Cicero Avenue was cheap, its walls the color of nicotine and defeat. I lay on the bed, listening to the traffic smear itself against the window, and thought, perhaps she is right. Perhaps I am nothing now. And yet something stirred. A pulse of refusal. Who was this woman claiming the house, dismissing me like a tenant overdue on rent? The Rachel I married would never have thrust me out into the cold without at least the courtesy of pretense. The next morning, I boarded a bus to the office of our attorney, Dr. Harold Pierce. I intended only to demand an explanation, some legal justification for my exile. What I discovered instead cracked the ground beneath me. Pierce, his eyes tired behind thick glasses, pulled a folder from his cabinet. "Daniel," he said, Your daughter updated her will 2 years ago. She left the house to you. 70% of her estate as well, about $23 million. The number meant nothing to me at first. Only syllables in the air, but then the implications sank in. Rachel had no claim. None. She showed me documents, I whispered. Pierce's lips tightened. Forged. She misrepresented your position. She lied to me. And to you. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not fury, but a strange clarity. The subservient Daniel, the one who nodded and yielded, died in that chair. Pierce dialed his phone with swift precision. I'm contacting the police. The banks as well. This is serious fraud. By the time I left his office, the accounts were frozen, the locks on the house contested, Rachel's elegant scheme collapsing like plaster struck by water. The game had turned. Detective work is never as glamorous as television makes it. It begins with paperwork, signatures, notarized affidavits that march across the desk in tedious succession. Still, each page was a stone placed back into the foundation of my existence. By the time I left Dr. Pierce's office that afternoon, I was no longer a displaced husband haunting a motel. I was, in the eyes of the law at least, the man who belonged. The Cicero Avenue Motel reeked of disinfectant that never quite overpowered the smell of mildew. I packed what little I had and called a cab. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, suspicious of the silence, until we turned down my street. My street, the map of my life, the cracked sidewalk I once shoveled in winters, the elm tree Natalie had climbed as a girl, the porch where Rachel had staged so many gracious performances for neighbors and dinner guests. I stepped onto the front walk with no key. Rachel had changed the locks in a flourish of cruelty, but an officer from the Chicago Police Department was already waiting. Courtesy of Pierce's call, Sergeant Luis Ortiz, Crime's Financial Division, a compact man with a soldier's posture and a voice that carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Mr. Walker, he said, shaking my hand, we'll have a locksmith here in 10 minutes. Don't worry, you'll be inside before the night's out. Rachel? I asked. Out of town, he said, though I doubted it. I could feel her presence, the perfume of her control lingering in every brick. The locksmith arrived, his drill buzzing like a wasp against the lock. The tumblers surrendered, and suddenly I was no longer in exile. The house breathed me back in. Inside, it was immaculate, almost sterile. Rachel had rearranged furniture in my absence, cleared photographs, hidden traces of me like an editor erasing words from a manuscript. My clothes were gone from the closet, my books boxed in the garage like relics, but Natalie's office remained untouched. A door closed at the end of the hall, as if even Rachel had not dared to trespass. I opened it and felt her presence instantly. The faint smell of her perfume, the neat rows of files, the desk with its scattered pens. This room had been sanctuary, and now it became mine. I sat in her chair, placed my palms on the polished wood, and for the first time in weeks, I did not feel invisible. Over the following days, I began to reclaim. The wine cellar, once Rachel's boast, I emptied of labels and transformed into a library. Cases of dusty Merlot rolled out, replaced by shelves that held Natalie's notebooks, Pierce's case files, volumes I retrieved from the garage. Each room I altered became less a monument to Rachel's performance of perfection and more an extension of my will. Meanwhile, Ortiz kept me informed. The falsifications were no longer a domestic squabble. They had teeth. Your wife, he said over the phone one evening, likely had help. Caleb Brooks. His connections at the bank are under review. You may not realize, Daniel, but this case has legs. Cards declined, accounts frozen. Rachel's calls began. The first was feigned confusion. There's been a mistake, Daniel. Some clerical issue. No mistake, I answered. You tried to erase me. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted me gone. A pause. Then the sharp intake of breath I had heard 1,000 times. The sound she made when her plans soured. The second call was angrier. You won't get away with this. Caleb has resources. More than you can imagine. I hung up before she could finish. For once, silence was my weapon. Alone in the house, I began to rediscover a voice I thought long dead. I painted again. Crude canvases at first, then figures that grew bolder, colors that cut against the gray of my mood. The studio filled with portraits of Natalie as a child, of myself in half-light, of Rachel reduced to a mask cracking at the edges. But painting did not erase the undertow of grief. At night, I heard echoes. Natalie laughing down the hall, Rachel humming in the kitchen in the early years when her affection still seemed real. Each memory hurt, but each also sharpened me, steeled me against the temptation to surrender. One morning, a knock on the door. Rachel herself, eyes swollen, her elegance reduced to something almost human. She stepped inside without invitation, trembling. "Daniel," she said, voice breaking. "I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But it was fear, not malice. Please, forgive me." On the desk in Natalie's office, I had cued a recording. Natalie's final gift, a video she had made 6 months before her death, a message meant for me if I were ever dishonored. I pressed play. Her face appeared on the screen, tired yet resolute. "Mom, if you're watching this, it means I fear what you would do to Dad. He deserves dignity, respect, love. If you can't give him that, then leave. But don't destroy him. He's stronger than you think." Rachel collapsed on the veranda outside, sobs racking the body she had armored for decades. I watched from the doorway. I felt neither triumph nor pity, only the steady weight of choice. I would no longer barter with her. No bargains, no concessions, only consequences. Still, fate was not finished with, because when the investigation widened, it revealed something darker than I could have imagined. Traces of money laundering, accounts linked to my name through Natalie's firm, old transactions, buried beneath layers of financial camouflage. For a moment, I faltered. Was this my punishment for complacency? Had I lived blind, allowing corruption to graft itself onto my life without protest? Rachel and Caleb seized on the discovery. Their calls turned into threats cloaked as offers. "Take the house, Daniel. We'll give you $5 million, clean, guaranteed. Walk away, or the FBI will come for you." Imagine the headlines. "Elderly widower complicit in fraud." They thought they had cornered me again. But grief, betrayal, and humiliation had burned away the man they remembered. I decided to move first. The night I chose to act, the house was unbearably still. I sat at Natalie's desk. The video paused on her face, her eyes fixed on me as though urging me forward. I poured myself a small measure of bourbon, let it burn down my throat, and opened the folder Sergeant Ortiz had left with me. Contact information for federal agents who had been briefed on the financial irregularities. One name stood out. Special Agent Maya Patel, Financial Crimes Division, FBI. Her handwriting was neat, a precise script that suggested discipline and a refusal to be hurried. I dialed the number. "Agent Patel," a brisk voice answered. "This is Daniel Walker," I said, my own voice steadier than I expected. "I believe my wife and her fiancé are attempting extortion, and I believe they have committed fraud on a scale that extends beyond me." A pause, and then the sound of papers shuffling. "Mr. Walker, we're aware of aspects of your case, but I need you to be very clear. Are you willing to cooperate fully, even if it involves personal risk?" "I've lived my life obedient," I told her. "I've already lost everything that can be taken. Risk doesn't scare me anymore." We arranged to meet at a discreet office near the Loop. The next morning, I walked through the glass doors of a nondescript federal building, where the guards checked my ID as if I were a criminal seeking pardon. Agent Patel emerged from a corridor, mid-30s, sharp eyes that missed nothing, a tailored suit without ornament. She extended her hand, firm, professional, and I understood immediately she would not be swayed by sentiment. She led me into a conference room, closed the door, and began recording. "Mr. Walker, tell me everything. Start from the beginning." So I did. I spoke of the dinner table, the brochures, the eviction, the forged will. I recounted Rachel's arrogance, Caleb's shadowy involvement, the sudden discovery of suspicious funds tied to my name. I left nothing out, even the humiliations I would have preferred to keep buried. Patel listened without interruption, jotting notes in a shorthand only she understood. When I finished, she tapped her pen against the pad. "We can use you, Mr. Walker. If you're willing, you'll wear a wire. You'll invite them here, to your home, and record their proposal. Extortion, conspiracy, fraud. It will all be on tape. Her eyes locked on mine, searching for hesitation. Will you do it? Yes, I said. For once in my life, I'll stop obeying. I'll act. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the small device they had fastened beneath my shirt. My reflection was strange to me. The lines deeper, the hair thinner, but the eyes sharper than they had been in decades. I walked through the rooms Rachel had tried to erase me from, touching the edges of furniture, the frames of doorways, the grain of wood. This was my battlefield now. Not swords or fists, but words. The phone rang. Rachel's voice, brittle. Daniel, Caleb and I will come by tomorrow evening. We want to resolve this. Peacefully. Good, I said. Come. When I hung up, I felt an odd calm. Tomorrow would not be peaceful. Tomorrow would be the turning point. I sat once more in Natalie's office, the air heavy with her absence. I whispered into the silence, though I no longer knew to whom. To my daughter? To myself? Or to whatever remnant of justice still flickered in this city. I'm ready. They arrived just after dusk. Rachel first, stepping out of Caleb's sleek black sedan with the poise of a woman still convinced she owned the narrative. Our heels clicked against the driveway in that rhythm I had once mistaken for elegance. Caleb followed, heavier, his jaw set, his suit a little too new, as though purchased for intimidation. He carried a briefcase. From the upstairs window, I watched them approach, the wire beneath my shirt humming like a secret heartbeat. I told myself not to tremble, not to show the desperation they expected to find in me. Tonight I would be something else, a man in control. I opened the door before they could knock. Daniel, Rachel said, her voice soft, rehearsed, almost maternal. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Come in, I said. We sat in the living room. How many evenings had we hosted neighbors here? Rachel orchestrating every detail. The wine, the music, the shallow conversations dressed as sophistication. Now the same room smelled of wiretap adhesive and quiet vengeance. Caleb set the briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. Inside, bundles of cash stacked with precision. His smile was thin, transactional. $5 million, he said. Clean, no questions. You accept this, plus the deed to the house, and we all walk away. No law enforcement, no headlines. Everyone wins. I looked at the cash without expression. And if I refuse? Rachel leaned forward. Don't be foolish, Daniel. The account's tied to your name. Those transactions will destroy you. Prison is no place for a man your age. Think about dignity. Think about ending your life with some peace. Her words were sharpened to wound, but I had prepared for them. I leaned back, folded my hands, and let silence stretch until even Caleb shifted uncomfortably. I'll need you to repeat that, I said at last. Repeat what? Rachel's smile faltered. Everything, I said evenly. The money. The threats. I want to hear it again, clearly. Caleb's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering. Why? Because I don't want to forget this moment. Rachel exhaled, mistaking my calm for defeat. Very well. $5 million. The house. In exchange, you never mention the forgeries, the lies, or the money laundering. You disappear quietly, and no one ever has to know. The words hung in the air, crisp and damning. I glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner. Its second hand ticked once. Twice then the front door burst open. FBI! Hands where we can see them. Agent Patel entered first, her pistol raised. Agents behind her moving with disciplined swiftness. Caleb froze, his mouth slack as the briefcase snapped shut under another agent's hand. Rachel turned to me, eyes wide, betrayal dawning in real time. Daniel, she whispered, as though my name itself were a plea. I said nothing. Handcuffs clicked around their wrists. The room, once curated for appearances, became a theater of collapse. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the flashing lights outside. For once, Rachel had no script. Her sobs were raw, unchoreographed, stripped of elegance. Patel touched my shoulder gently. We'll need your statement, Mr. Walker, but you did well. Very well. I nodded, though inside I felt neither triumph nor relief, only a hollow echo where rage had lit. The following weeks blurred into interviews, affidavits, the grinding machinery of justice. Caleb was charged with conspiracy and fraud, Rachel with forgery elder abuse, attempted extortion. Their sentences would not be long. The wealthy rarely suffer proportional punishment, but long enough to mark them, long enough to dismantle their illusion of untouchable lives. And yet, even as I signed documents and answered questions, another revelation awaited, one that would twist grief into something stranger. One evening, Patel returned to the house with a sealed envelope. She placed it on the desk, her expression softer than I had ever seen it. "Mr. Walker," she said, "there's something you need to know about your daughter." I opened the envelope. Inside were reports, transcripts, surveillance logs. Natalie's name threaded through them like a hidden watermark. She wasn't just a banker, Patel explained quietly. For more than a decade, she was working with us. An informant. She infiltrated networks, laundering money through her bank. She gave us the Lombardi family several indictments. The assets she left you, they weren't tainted. They were legitimate, drawn from federal compensations and recovered funds. She made sure you'd be protected. I read the words, but they blurred. Natalie, my daughter, whom I thought I had failed, who had always seemed half distant in her adult years, had been living a double life. She had not abandoned me to Rachel's scorn. She had been shielding me in ways I could never have guessed. Patel touched the envelope. She knew her mother was slipping away from you. She wanted you to have this, to have everything. It was her way of choosing your side. For the first time in months, I wept without shame. Grief became something else after that revelation. No longer a dull ache, no longer just the weight of Natalie's absence. It was pride, disguised as sorrow, mixed with shame that I had not seen her strength while she was alive. She had walked into danger with more courage than I had ever mustered in all my years of compliance. And she had done it not for accolades, not for herself, but for me. The weeks after Rachel's arrest unfolded in slow waves of aftermath. For a long time, I could not rid myself of the sound of the handcuffs closing around her wrists. A small, metallic punctuation that seemed to echo through the walls, even after she was gone. I would walk from room to room and hear it again. Click, click, as if the house itself remembered. I told myself I was free, but freedom proved to be a complicated inheritance. For decades, I had been defined in opposition to Rachel's ambition, to Natalie's distance, to the world's polite disregard of a man who had grown older without acquiring importance. Now, with the house legally mine and the inheritance secured, I found myself in an expanse of silence. Liberation, I discovered, can resemble exile if one is not careful. The silence drove me to work. I painted furiously, canvases sprawling across the floor of Natalie's old office, brushes left in jars of turpentine, the air thick with linseed oil and turpentine. At first, the figures were grotesque, dark shapes with no eyes, bodies blurred at the edges, twisted mouths. I recognized Rachel in them, Caleb too, but more often I recognized myself, the version of me that had tolerated insult after insult, eroded piece by piece until nothing seemed left. I painted him as a corpse, as a shadow, as a man drowning in a room with no doors. But then something shifted. The colors grew brighter. The figures stood straighter. One canvas showed a man walking across a chessboard, the pawns fallen behind him, the king's crown within reach. I did not need to label him. The image spoke plainly enough. The day I decided to reclaim the house in earnest, I invited contractors to tear out the drapes Rachel had chosen, the imported rugs she had boasted about to every dinner guest, the glass chandeliers she had polished as though they were relics from Versailles. Piece by piece, her reign vanished. I let light into the kitchen by knocking out the wall between it and the sitting room. I built shelves in the basement, not for wine but for books, every volume a voice she had tried to silence. At night I still dreamed of Natalie. Sometimes she was a child, asking me to push her on a swing in the park. Sometimes she was the efficient woman I remembered in adulthood, dressed sharply for work, always rushing. But most often, since Patel handed me the envelope, she appeared in dreams I could not easily interpret, standing in shadowy rooms, speaking to men I did not recognize, sliding folders across desks. I would wake with her voice in my ears, urgent but indecipherable. Her secret life haunted me. I read the files Patel had given me until the pages blurred. Natalie had been braver than I, more cunning, more ruthless. She had stepped into danger willingly, knowing it might cost her everything, while I had spent years obediently shrinking to fit Rachel's demands. I admired her and resented her in equal measure. Admired her courage, resented that she had not confided in me, that she had died with half her life still hidden from me. One evening, I drove to the cemetery, though I had not visited her grave since the funeral. The grass was overgrown, damp from spring rain. I stood there awkwardly, like a man at a stranger's memorial. "I didn't know you," I whispered. "Not really, but you knew me. And somehow, you still chose my side." The wind rattled the trees, offering no answer. Rachel's letters began arriving then. Prison stationery, her handwriting as ornate as ever. The first read like confession, the second like justification, the third like a performance. "I was afraid," she wrote. "I was cornered. I wanted to preserve what we had. You misread everything, Daniel. I never stopped loving you." Love? She had weaponized that word for years. I read one letter, then placed it in the drawer. The rest I did not open. I was done playing audience to her monologues. The foundation began as a modest idea. I had read one article too many about the elderly defrauded by their own children, stripped of homes, locked in care facilities that were more prisons than sanctuaries. I recognized myself in those stories. The disposable husband, the aging father dismissed as irrelevant. The indignity of it gnawed at me until I called Pierce, who connected me with another lawyer. Papers were drawn, accounts allocated. Within weeks, the Daniel Walker Foundation for the Protection of the Elderly was incorporated. At first, it was nothing more than a website and a few phone lines. But then calls came. A woman in Hyde Park whose son had emptied her bank account. A man in Rogers Park who had been forced from his home by a fraudulent power of attorney. Their stories mirrored mine. I funded their cases, found lawyers who still believed in justice, and for the first time in years, I felt purpose burn inside me. Reporters soon followed. They wanted a narrative of redemption. The betrayed husband transformed into activist. I gave them enough to print, but not more. I refused to let Rachel's betrayal define me in headlines. Instead, I spoke of boundaries, of dignity, of the silent epidemic of neglect. And still the house shifted with me. The rooms grew warmer, filled with light and canvases. Visitors from the foundation came sometimes, interns, attorneys, volunteers, and they would pause at the threshold of my studio, staring at the paintings. Some flinched at the early grotesques. Others admired the later, brighter works. Few recognized them all as pieces of the same man. One painting in particular consumed me, a figure in full light, his face stern but unafraid, his hand outstretched as if to steady himself against the invisible weight of the world. I painted him slowly, layer by layer, until the resemblance to me was unmistakable. He was not triumphant, not smiling, but unbroken. 6 months after the arrests, the kitchen smelled of fresh paint and new wood. Sunlight filtered through windows Rachel had never allowed me to replace. I was preparing coffee when the phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mr. Walker?" A calm, professional voice. "This is Special Agent Maya Patel." I gripped the receiver. "Yes. We've uncovered additional information connected to your daughter's work. It concerns you directly. We'll need to meet privately. Are you available this week?" The glass of water in my other hand trembled slightly, sending ripples across the surface. Outside, dusk had begun to creep, shadows stretching long across the lawn. "What kind of information?" I asked. "Not over the phone," she said. "You'll understand when you see it." I looked at the chessboard painting still drying in the studio, the crown within reach of the solitary figure, the peon who had crossed to the other side. "Tell me when," I said. I sometimes think the only true title I ever deserved was father. Not husband, not provider, not citizen, just father. And not even in some abstract, noble sense. Not the kind of word you carve on marble. I mean the ordinary business of it. Waiting in the carpool line, holding a feverish child against your chest at 3 in the morning, running your hand over homework you barely understood because the curriculum had outpaced your education. Those were the moments when I felt most substantial. With Natalie, I was never entirely lost. She gave me coordinates, a map of who I was. I remember the smallness of her hand when she first learned to write her name. She scrawled Nat across everything: books, walls, the underside of the kitchen table. Rachel scolded, of course, horrified at the disorder. But I laughed, because to me those 3 letters looked like a declaration of life. I exist. I mark the world. Later, when she joined the high school debate team, I drove her to tournaments across the Midwest. She sat in the passenger seat with a folder of notes, rehearsing arguments about free trade or environmental policy. Her voice carried conviction even then, sharp enough to cut through the static of AM radio. At rest stops, she always bought the same thing: a packet of sunflower seeds, which she ate methodically, spitting shells into a paper cup. I never liked sunflower seeds, but to this day, the smell of them reminds me of being useful. Being useful, that's what fatherhood was for me. Not grandeur, not perfection, just presence. She asked, and I was there. It's painful to admit that those years were also when the cracks in my marriage began to widen. Rachel was already restless, already peering over fences for something shinier. Her ambition was not maternal. She loved Natalie, yes, but as a reflection, an accessory to be polished. School concerts, recitals, Rachel attended them in perfect outfits, as though motherhood were another stage for her elegance. But the quieter moments, the messy ones, she delegated those to me. Sick days, tantrums, late-night tears over friendships gone sour. Those were mine. At first, I thought we complemented each other. She the public figure, I the private support. But slowly it became clear that Rachel did not want balance. She wanted supremacy. My role shrank each year, not by accident, but by her orchestration. She corrected me in front of guests, interrupted me at the table, rolled her eyes when I spoke. I learned silence as a survival skill. The ruin of our marriage was not a single catastrophe, but an accumulation of small withdrawals. Like a house where you stop repairing the roof, then the pipes, then the foundation, until one day you wake to find the place unlivable. By the time Natalie was grown, Rachel and I were no longer partners. We were adversaries pretending at civility. Still, Natalie's presence tethered us. She could walk into the room and, without realizing it, impose a truce. I wonder if she sensed it, if she knew she was the only bridge between us. Children often do, long before they can articulate it. When she died, that bridge collapsed. Rachel looked at me across the casket, not with grief, but with calculation. I was no longer necessary. And what is more disposable in our society than an aging man stripped of function? The brochures came next. The suitcases. The eviction. But Rachel had miscalculated one thing. She underestimated how much being Natalie's father had fortified me. Even grief, even humiliation could not erase the decades of quiet loyalty. She thought I would crumple like tissue paper. Instead, I discovered a spine. When Agent Patel revealed the truth, that Natalie had been working with the FBI, that she had left me not only money but protection, foresight, allegiance, I felt the weight of those years shift. All along, my daughter had seen me. She had known the battles I could not win against Rachel, and she had chosen to arm me posthumously. It was her final debate, her last case argued, and she had argued for me. I'd walk through the house now and see it differently. Not as Rachel's stage, not as my exile, but as Natalie's inheritance to me. Every wall is marked with echoes of her. The kitchen table where she etched her initials. The hallway where she taped her debate medals. The porch where she once sat waiting for a boy who never arrived. Each space is a reminder that I was not the useless man Rachel painted. I was, for all my flaws, a father. The foundation grows each month. We have filed lawsuits, passed ordinances, built a network of advocates. I attend hearings where elderly men and women testify about their betrayals, their dispossessions. I listen, I nod, and I recognize myself in their voices. When I speak to them afterward, I tell them what I had to learn the hard way. They may call you obsolete, but you are not invisible. Not unless you let them make you so. Some nights I imagine Natalie hearing me say this. Perhaps she laughs, amused at my sudden rhetoric. Perhaps she nods, satisfied. Either way, I feel her approval like a hand on my shoulder. Rachel remains where she belongs, behind bars, counting the days. Caleb too. Their sentences are short, yes, But time moves differently when stripped of audience. Without admiration to feed on, they will wither, and I will not be there to witness it. That, I realize, is its own kind of punishment. As for me, I live in the strange light of late freedom. I paint. I read. I work. I learn what it means to speak without waiting for permission. Some mornings I stand in front of the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back. Older, yes, but not diminished. Hardened, perhaps, but not bitter. The latest canvas stands on the easel now. A chessboard stretches across it, black and white squares disappearing into horizon. At the far end, a pawn stands transformed into a king, his crown rough, imperfect, yet unmistakable. Behind him, the fallen pieces scatter in shadow. In front of him, the board continues. Not victory, but continuation. As I paint the final strokes, the phone rings. Mr. Walker? A calm, professional voice. Agent Patel again. Yes, we've uncovered additional information connected to your daughters. It concerns you directly. We'll need to meet privately. Are you available this week? I look at the painting, the crown, the horizon, the pawn that has crossed the board. Tell me when, I say. And for the first time in a long time, I feel not dread, not weariness, but anticipation. Thank you for listening. Help a friend out? Subscribe to the channel. Thank you.